Jordan Elgrably, who's our guest today, I'm very grateful that he's able to join us, is the editor of the Marquaz Review. That's a literary arts publication and cultural institution that curates content and programs on the greater Middle East. And we're going to put a link to the chat in the chat to the journal, and also the co-editor of a new anthology called Sumud, A New Palestinian Reader. And that's particularly what we're excited to talk to him about. Jordan, thank you for doing this. You just need to unmute yourself.
It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. So I don't know if you have a first question or if you would like me to give
Um,
everyone some context.
well, I thought my first question would be just, and people can put subsequent questions in the chat, but just basically if you can talk about the anthology and the range of different kind of writing, and what are the themes that in contemporary Palestinian writing that you think are most significant?
Okay, well, that's a lot of ground to cover, but in terms of the anthology, it ranges from essays to literary reviews to a lot of poetry. Mohammed El-Kurd, Mossab Abu Toha, Noor Lindy, Zaina Azam, and others. There's a short story that's a futuristic story that takes place in Gaza 100 years from 2014, uh, which we, which it was very interesting because it talks about drones and it talks about a lot of things that, we saw happening in the last 15, 16 months in real time. It's a reader, so it's kind of that old-fashioned idea of a book that is meant to that you can pick up and start anywhere and move around and just get different ideas going and lots of references to other writers. A lot of the writers are people who've been in the Marquez Review repeatedly, like Raja Shahade, who you guys probably know, Palestinian lawyer and human rights activist who's published many books. Um, Salma Dabakh, who is a British Palestinian writer, writes a lot of reviews for us, and a few other people. There are also American Jews and other Americans who aren't Jewish who are in this book because they've been to Gaza and they write about their experiences. One in particular is Diane Shamas, who's a Lebanese American educator, and she went to Gaza 3 or 4 times and actually taught there on a volunteer basis. So she wrote a really interesting essay about her experiences over the years. A lot of these pieces appeared before October 7th, and some of them appeared afterwards. But the October 7th attack and the subsequent onslaught by Israel on all of Gaza is the context in which this book was created.
Okay, thank you for that. And again, I want to encourage people to put questions in the chat. I'm curious if there are, if there's maybe you want to pick out one particular piece just to go into a little bit of in a little more detail that you think is particularly striking in some way.
Well, yeah, I'm going to be a little selfish about it because as a writer and a journalist, and as an American, and as a French citizen, and as somebody who's also Jewish, I'm extremely concerned about honoring international humanitarian law. And the essay that I wrote in the book is called "They Kill Writers, Don't They?" Because in Gaza and in South Lebanon, Israel intentionally targeted media workers and killed many of them with impunity. And so I tried to get some answers from the Ministry of Defense, from the Prime Minister's office, from a number of different official Israeli government organs to explain this policy because it became very apparent that it was a policy, and subsequently forensic architecture, which has won numerous awards for their work, worked on that, and other, there was investigations by the Committee to Protect Journalists. So, long story short, I find it appalling that uh, there's no explanation, no justification for the murder of all of these poets, writers, and media workers, in Gaza. And what is that going to do to international humanitarian law? And what is it doing for or against journalists who are trying to work in whatever country. I just feel like it sets a horrible example for other governments, other regimes. Well, Israel was able to kill all of these journalists and not allow foreign reporters into Gaza the entire time. So why should we allow press to cover our attacks? Turkey will see this as an opportunity to really go gangbusters even more on the Kurds. China obviously can uh, punish Uyghurs and not allow any press in there. So part of my effort in putting the book together with Malu Halasa, our co-editor, has very much to do with what happens after Gaza in terms of international humanitarian law. And the International Criminal Court has issued warrants for Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, which obviously are being ignored by Israel. But this is the context in which we're living today. So if you're concerned about human rights and liberties, you should be concerned about these issues.
Yeah. I think
And,
yeah. Go
and
ahead.
also, I should say, I forgot that there is this is not something that started on October 7th, as far as Israel is concerned, and I write about this extensively elsewhere. The policy to kill writers began as far back as 1972 and possibly earlier, when the Mossad went to Beirut and blew up a car with the writer Ghassan Kanafani in it, also killing his nephew, his niece, who was 17 years old at the time. Kanafani never picked up a weapon, but he was a writer who wrote fiction and he wrote about politics. He was kind of a Marxist writer. Uh, Kanafani is sort of like the Palestinian James Baldwin. He's been his work has been studied and republished and republished. And there's a new book out of his political writings that a lot of it hasn't been translated before from Arabic. So they killed him, and then there were many others that followed suit. And then Shireen Abu Akleh was killed in 2022. And again, forensic architecture proved that it was a deliberate targeting. I mean, you want to call it assassination, call it murder, call it what you will, but she was a Palestinian American citizen, and her death was investigated, but nobody was found culpable, and they have gotten away with that.
Yeah. Jordan, we have a question just about the title of the book, Sumud. Maybe you can just first translate that for people who are not familiar with it and talk about the idea and why you decided to give that why did you decide to give the anthology that title?
Sumud is standing fast or steadfastness. It's the word that Palestinians use to talk about the way that they can survive, one Gaza onslaught after another, or all the attacks that you've seen in Ramallah and Jenin in the West Bank over the years. It's just the ability to resist oppression and keep your stuff together. They just closed off of closed in Gaza. I mean, Israel is not allowing humanitarian aid in again. I don't know if they stopped that, but in the last 24 hours. But uh, try to imagine what it means to stand fast or to resist when there's no water, no food, no sewage, no medicine. Most of the hospitals are destroyed. For me, being resistant or standing fast would be okay. Which political representative do I call to complain about the latest thing that Trump and Musk are doing? And we in the West, we're much more privileged I live in the south of France and also in California. Our standing fast is a little bit different from what Palestinians live and Lebanese as well. But we chose the title Sumud because it's a word that has been in common currency, excuse me, in Palestinian literature and writing and in the human rights activism for many years.